Magandang tanghali, Pilipinas! Narito na naman po tayo, Mobile Presidential Press Briefing. Nandito po tayo ngayon sa Villamor Air Base kung saan lilipad po tayo papunta ng Davao sakay po ng isang C295. Ang tawag po namin dyan, cargo class flight to Davao. So anyway, antayin nyo po mamaya dahil magkakaroon po ng Talk to the People ang Presidente mula po sa syudad ng Davao. Kasama na po ang Estados Unidos sa listahan ng mga bansang subject to travel restrictions, no? Dahil sa bagong variant ng COVID-19 na unang na-detect sa United Kingdom. Epektibo mula kahapon, alas 3 ng Enero, 12:01 AM Manila time, at tatagal hanggang 15 ng Enero ang mga banyagang pasahero manggagaling ng Estados Unidos o nagpunta sa bansang iyon 14 na araw bago dumating sa Pilipinas at pinagbabawalan na makapasok sa Pilipinas. Ayon sa Bureau of Immigration, mag-a-apply ito sa lahat ng mga foreigners regardless kung anong visa category o kung may nakuha silang previous endorsement or exemption mula sa Department of Foreign Affairs o mga pribilehiyo sa ilalim ng Republic Act 6768 or yung tinatawag na Balikbayan Program Law sa panahon ng travel restriction. Kung inyong matatandaan, una nang na-impose ang restriction sa 20 bansa. Ito po ay ang United Kingdom, Denmark, Ireland, Japan, Australia, Israel, Netherlands, Hong Kong, Switzerland, France, Germany, Iceland, Italy, Lebanon, Singapore, Sweden, South Korea, South Africa, Canada, Spain. Tatagal hanggang 15 ng Enero ngayong taon ang restriction sa mga nasabing bansa. Hindi kasali ang mga Pilipino sa kautusan na ito, no? Pero kinakailangan ng ating mga kababayan na sumailalim sa absolute facility-based 14-day quarantine kahit nag-negatibo sila sa kanilang RT-PCR test. Sa mga dumating mula Estados Unidos or may biyahe mula rito 14 na araw bago lumapag ng bansa bago mag-atres ng Enero 12:01 AM Manila time, pinapayagan silang makapasok, ngunit kinakailangan nilang sumailalim sa absolute facility-based quarantine period kahit may negatibong resulta sila sa swab test. Sa mga banyagang pasahero na nakatransit sa listahan ng mga bansang nasa travel restriction, pinapayagan silang makapasok ng Pilipinas kung sila ay nananatili lamang sa mga paliparan ng mga bansang nabanggit or hindi na clear na pumasok sa mga bansang iyon. Pinapayagan silang mag-home quarantine kung ang result ng kanilang RT-PCR test ay negatibo. Pero kung ang transiting foreign passenger na ito ay umalis ng airport o pinayagang makapasok sa mga bansang kasali sa travel restrictions, hindi sila maaaring makapasok sa Pilipinas. Ngunit kung ang transiting passengers ay mga Pilipino, papayagan sila makapasok sa bansa, ngunit kailangan nilang sumailalim sa absolute facility-based 14-day quarantine period kahit negatibo pa ang kanilang mga swab tests. COVID-19 updates po tayo. Ito po ang global updates ayon sa Johns Hopkins, no? Higit 85 million or 85,068,700 na po ang tinamaan ng COVID-19 sa buong mundo. Nasa 1,842,095 katao naman po ang nabawian na ng buhay dahil sa coronavirus. Nangunguna pa rin ang Estados Unidos na mayroong mahigit 20.6 million na mga kaso at 351,452 deaths. Pangalawa ang India, pangatlo po ang Brazil, sumusunod ang Russia at ang France. Dito po sa ating bayan, meron po tayong 20,292 na mga aktibong kaso. Ayon po yan sa January 3, 2021 datos ng Department of Health. Sa mga aktibong mga kaso, 89.1% ay asymptomatic, mild or moderate, samantalang 6.7% ay critical. Nasa 3.6% naman po ang severe. Mahigit 8,000 or 8,316 naman po ang gumaling. Ang buong bilang ng gumaling ay halos nasa kalahating milyon na or 448,258 or 93.8% recovery rate. Samantalang malungkot naming binabalita na 9,257 ang nabawian na po ng buhay dahil sa coronavirus. Nananatili nasa 1.94% ang fatality rate, nakikiramay po kami. Kamustahin naman po natin ang ating mga ospital. Nasa 61% available pa po ang ating mga ICU beds. 70% available pa po ang ating isolation beds. 78% available naman po ang ating ward beds. At mayroon pa tayong 78% na mga available ventilators. Dito po tayo nagtatapos sa ating presentasyon pero meron po tayong dalawang panauhin. Unahin po natin si Mr. Fernando Zobel de Ayala tungkol sa private sector initiative sa bakuna at ang ating ambassador sa China, ang ating suke, Ambassador Chito Santoromana. Sa ating mga kasama sa media, dahil meron pong pagpupulong si Mr. Zobel ng 12:30, uunahin po natin ang mga tanong para sa kanya. Mr. Fernando Zobel, thank you for joining us. Ang tanong ko po ay ano po ang naging commitment ng Ayala Corporation sa pagbili ng AstraZeneca? Ilan po at magkano ang halagang bibili ninyong bakuna? At ilan po ang ibibigay nyo sa gobyerno at ilan ang ibibigay ninyo sa inyong mga empleyado? Mr. Zobel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Harry. Happy New Year to everyone, to your audience, to all your guests today. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you, Secretary Harry. So our commitment, thanks to the help of General Galvez and Vince Dizon and the leadership also of Joey Concepcion in the private sector, we've decided to order 450,000 vaccines of AstraZeneca. So the total donation that we will be giving to government will be about 120 million pesos. Government in turn, as you know, Secretary Harry, has requested that 50% be given for individuals that the government selects and 50% will be given back to the private sector so that we can also provide the vaccines for the people who need it. The total cost, as I have understood it, is $5.50, with the 50 centavos being for the logistical requirements to bring it in. But in addition to that, Secretary Harry, I wanted to mention that along with Secretary Galvez and Secretary Dizon, we're also helping with the distribution, which is going to be a very important component in making sure that the vaccines can get to the public. This is a critical component, and as you know, each of the vaccines, whether it's AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, Novavax, or Sinovac, have their own peculiar requirements for distribution. So through T3 and the government, we're also helping try to figure out how the distribution will take place, as this is such an important part.
Well, Mr. Zobel, alam ko po na napakadami ng tulong ang nabigay ninyo sa gobyerno mula nung nagsimula ang COVID-19, no? Hindi po bababa ata sa 8 bilyon na ang naibigay niyong tulong bukod pa dito sa bibili ninyong bakuna. Bakit napakalaki po ng ginagastos ng Ayala Corporation para po dito sa ating COVID-19 response?
Secretary Harry, actually, as of the end of the year, it's 12.7 billion already. We've never faced anything like this in at least in our recent history as a company, Secretary. This is a time for everyone, private sector, public sector, to work together. Never have we faced a crisis of these proportions that has produced so much suffering in our country. So I'd like to think that the private sector has come through in a very big way with a call from the government and tried to do everything that they could, not only for their employees, their suppliers, but the public in general. I think we're all here to help the country as a whole in the best way that we can. And so never in the history, at least in my career, have I seen so much work taking place between the private sector and the public sector. And we appreciate, Secretary Harry, that you've also, and that the other members of the government have mentioned the contributions of the private sector. That's greatly appreciated. And this will, of course, continue into next year. It has continued also through some of the recent disasters and typhoons that we've had. So there's a great spirit of collaboration among everyone to make sure that we get our country through this pandemic and through the many different challenges that we have been facing.
Well, sa ngalan po ng ating Presidente Rodrigo Roa Duterte at sa Sa ngalan po ng buong sambayan ng Pilipino, nagpapasalamat po kami sa inyong mga tulong na ibinibigay sa ating mga kababayan, and it will not be forgotten. Well, because you have an appointment po at 12:30, mga kasama sa Malacañang Press Corps, kung meron po kayong mga katanungan kay Mr. Zubel, can you ask them now?
Yes, good afternoon, Secretary Harry. Melo Acuña here.
Yes, go ahead, Melo.
Thank you. Happy
Yes,
New Year.
go ahead, Melo.
Yes, I'm just as curious as anybody else
Happy New Year.
of Mr. Zobel's outlook for business, because the private sector has contributed a lot to the government's efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Filipino people. But given the business climate, will that also affect your business and your assistance to the government and your stakeholders? May I have your views about this, sir?
Yes, of course, sir. I think a lot of companies last year, especially during the worst part of the pandemic, were on survival mode. They really had to look back at their businesses. We had to do a combination of two things. One was to help people, but the other was to keep our businesses running. And it's not just our internal businesses. We rely so much on suppliers and other businesses as part of the running of our businesses. And so we really had to watch out for many people to make sure that they could survive this. So it was really very rough during that period. Fortunately, I feel that a lot of the businesses were fairly well capitalized before going into this crisis. We've been lucky as a country, and that's thanks to the good efforts of the government, to be operating in a fairly low interest environment, and where we have been able to raise capital in the past. We were actually also able to raise capital in the middle of the pandemic. This was the comfort that banks and bondholders had and investors had in the Philippines. And we've actually been able to borrow at record low rates during the pandemic year. So what that does is that helps us get through the crisis, and it allows us to continue investing as a company. As a matter of fact, if I could mention that last year, we invested about 157 billion pesos in different types of capex: telecom, real estate, land, water. And next year, we may spend up to about 182 billion. So I think if companies continue to invest and create jobs, we will be able to help people get out of this crisis. It will not be easy, but we have to continue. We have to continue growing the engine of the economy.
You're that optimistic, sir.
Well, I hope we don't get a second wave. I think Secretary Harry and all our officials have cautioned all of us that we must be extremely careful. We're seeing around the world that everyone is being faced with the second wave. If we get faced with a second wave, the situation will be very different. But if we don't, every month that passes has started to show better results in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of mobility, in terms of people expanding and investing again. I was quite pleasantly surprised that our OFW remittance numbers did not go down as much as we thought they would, and are now doing a little better. That's a safety net for many of our Filipinos in the country. So I'm cautiously optimistic and hopeful that we will see growth next year, hopefully 5-6%, which will be a very dramatic reversal from what we have seen for this year, for understandable reasons.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melo. Meron pa bang ibang katanungan para kay Mr. Ayala? Since wala na po ata, Mr. Fernando Zubel, thank you very much po on behalf again of the President and a grateful nation. Thank you very much for all your assistance in these times of pandemic.